Welcome to this calming journey through the many factions of Skyrim. Let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from tonight and what other games you want to see next. If you enjoy these relaxing explorations, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next one. Together, we will drift into the rivalries, secrets, and legends of the groups that shape the land of the Nords, from assassins in the shadows to warriors in ancient halls. The factions of Skyrim are not just organizations, but living reflections of history, power, and survival. Each one carries with it layers of tradition and myth, drawing on centuries of struggle while influencing the future of the province. When you walk into a mead hall or descend into a hidden sanctuary, you step into stories that extend far beyond the Dragonborn's journey. These groups remind us that Skyrim is not only a land of dragons and magic, but also a place where people form bonds, rivalries, and secret oaths to weather the storms of time. The companions stand at the heart of this tradition, rooted in the ancient 500 companions who once followed Ysgramor across the Sea of Ghosts. Their modern incarnation in Whiterun's Jorvaskr Hall carries forward that spirit of battle and loyalty. Unlike the Knights of Cyrodiil or the militias of Morrowind, the companions embrace a code that values honor and strength above titles or politics. Yet beneath their camaraderie lies a hidden truth. Their leaders, known as the Circle, bear the curse of lycanthropy, transforming into werewolves as both gift and burden. This secret creates tension within their ranks, for while some see the beast blood as a blessing of power, others view it as a stain on their legacy. The rituals of the companions reveal just how deeply this duality runs. New recruits, or whelps, train under veterans who test both skill and loyalty. But only a select few are invited into the Circle, where they must drink werewolf blood in the Underforge, accepting Hircine's lycanthropic curse. This ceremony binds them to the Wild Hunt, linking them to a power older than the Nords themselves. For outsiders, the companions appear to be a band of mercenaries and guardians. For those within the Circle, they are participants in a pact that ties them to forces beyond their understanding. The tension between tradition and secrecy defines the companions' identity, leaving them both noble and cursed in equal measure. While the companions embody the strength of Skyrim's warrior spirit, the Thieves Guild in Riftton represents another side of the province. Once powerful, the guild had fallen into decline by the time the Dragonborn arrives, its influence weakened by poor leadership and rivals like Maven Blackbriar pulling strings behind the scenes. The guild's headquarters, the Ratway beneath Riftton, mirrors this decay. Its corridors are filled with damp shadows, broken furniture, and whispers of glory long lost. Yet even in this state, the guild retains fragments of its past power, waiting for the right spark to reignite it. The rituals of the Thieves Guild are steeped in symbolism. Members swear loyalty through shadowy ceremonies, pledging service not only to their leaders, but to the Daedric Prince Nocturnal, who embodies luck, stealth, and the balance of fortune. The Nightingales, a secretive inner circle within the guild, take this bond even further. Their oath ties their souls directly to Nocturnal in exchange for supernatural gifts, such as invisibility and heightened stealth. This pact illustrates how far the guild is willing to go in pursuit of influence, blurring the line between mortal cunning and divine intervention. For all their decline, the Thieves Guild remains rooted in forces greater than mere coin. The fall and rise of the guild is one of the province's most compelling tales. Once they controlled smuggling, protection rackets, and black markets across Skyrim, but greed and betrayal led to disunity, causing their enemies to seize opportunities and weaken them. When the Dragonborn enters their world, the guild stands at a crossroads. Its restoration requires both political maneuvering and spiritual renewal, culminating in the rekindling of their connection to Nocturnal through the Twilight Sepulchre. This arc demonstrates how even in the darkest times, a faction built on shadows can reclaim its strength. On the opposite end of the moral spectrum lies the College of Winterhold. Perched atop a cliff, battered by northern winds, the college represents the heart of magical study in Skyrim. Its survival is itself a marvel, given that much of Winterhold City was destroyed in the Great Collapse, a disaster that left many Nords suspicious of the mages who dwelled there. To many common folk, the college embodies danger and arrogance, a place where scholars toy with forces they cannot control. Yet within its halls, apprentices and masters alike seek knowledge not for power alone, but to uncover truths buried in ancient tomes and lost artifacts. The college's structure emphasizes study over hierarchy. Students are guided by masters who specialize in schools of magic, such as destruction, illusion, or conjuration. The Archmage oversees them all, though the position is often as much symbolic as practical. The college thrives on exploration, sending members into ruins across Skyrim to recover relics and scrolls. Yet this pursuit often puts them at odds with both the public and rival factions. Their research into the Eye of Magnus during the Dragonborn's time demonstrates how easily their quest for knowledge can spiral into dangerous territory, threatening the entire province. Suspicion of the college runs deep. The Nords of Skyrim often distrust magic, associating it with elves and outsiders. Many blame the Great Collapse directly on the college, though whether this is true or superstition remains uncertain. This mistrust forces the mages into isolation, their great hall serving as both refuge and prison. Within those walls, however, lies a wealth of secrets, libraries filled with forgotten lore, enchanted artifacts pulsing with strange energies, and apprentices experimenting in hopes of pushing the boundaries of possibility, all remind us that Skyrim's greatest dangers and wonders often come from those who seek to bend the laws of reality. Finally, no discussion of Skyrim's factions can begin without acknowledging the civil war that splits the province. On one side stand the Stormcloaks, Nord rebels who seek to drive out the Empire and restore independence under the leadership of Ulfric. On the other side are the Imperial Legion, loyal to the Emperor and determined to keep Skyrim within the bounds of the Empire. This conflict is not merely political, but deeply cultural. For the Stormcloaks, it is a fight for tradition, faith, and freedom. For the Imperials, it is a fight for stability, unity, and survival against the rising threat of the Aldmeri Dominion. The war shapes every hold, with towns and villages divided over loyalty. Families are torn apart, and trade routes are disrupted. Battles rage across forts and fields, with each side convinced of the righteousness of its cause. The Dragonborn can choose to support one side or remain neutral, but the conflict itself underscores a central theme of Skyrim, that even in the shadow of dragons, humanity's greatest battles are often fought against itself. The Civil War also reveals the complexity of factional loyalty. Ulfric is hailed as a hero by his followers, but condemned as a murderer by his enemies for his role in the death of High King Torrig. The Empire claims to stand for law and order, yet its decision to outlaw the worship of Talos alienates the very people it seeks to govern. This clash of ideals ensures that neither side is purely noble or entirely corrupt, leaving the question of Skyrim's future uncertain no matter who emerges victorious. The factions of Skyrim reflect not only power struggles, but also the hidden traditions that tie the province to its mythic past. Beyond the well-known groups like the Companions or the College of Winterhold lies a darker circle whose influence seeps into every corner of Tamriel. The Dark Brotherhood is one of the most infamous organizations in all of the Elder Scrolls, feared for its assassins who kill in silence, guided by rituals as old as Shadow itself. Their sanctuaries exist as hidden places where whispers of death echo, and their members see themselves not merely as murderers for hire, but as instruments of a higher power. The Dark Brotherhood's loyalty lies with the Night Mother, a mysterious figure whose voice reaches through the void to guide her followers. According to legend, the Night Mother speaks directly to listeners, chosen mortals, who then convey her will to the rest of the Brotherhood. The assassins call this divine communication the Black Sacrament, a ritual performed by desperate souls seeking the Brotherhood's services. In Skyrim, players encounter Aventus Aretino, a child who performs this rite in the hope of summoning assassins to rid him of his cruel caretaker. This unsettling moment demonstrates how the Brotherhood's presence permeates even the lives of the most vulnerable, turning grief and desperation into contracts for death. Their rituals are not only spiritual but symbolic. Members swear unbreakable oaths to never betray the Brotherhood, knowing that punishment for disloyalty is death. Their sanctuaries are decorated with shrines to the Night Mother, their halls lit with candles that flicker over skulls and red flowers that echo spilled blood. The Black Hand, a leadership council of 5, oversees the order, with each hand representing a finger and the listener acting as the thumb that directs them all. These symbols reinforce their identity as a family, bound by shadows rather than blood. Even betrayal is seen not merely as treason, but as sacrilege against the void itself. The Skyrim chapter of the Brotherhood had fallen into decline by the time of the Dragonborn's story. Their sanctuary, near Falkreath, is reduced to a handful of members struggling to maintain relevance. Astrid, their leader at the time, had replaced devotion to the Night Mother with her own system of contracts, straining the group's connection to its roots. This decision left them vulnerable to both betrayal and retribution, ultimately setting the stage for their unraveling. Yet the Brotherhood's ability to regenerate from even the smallest ember of faith demonstrates their resilience. Even when nearly destroyed, their rituals endure, and the whispers of the Night Mother find new listeners. The Forsworn provide another perspective on Skyrim's factions, embodying the fierce independence of the Reachmen people. Native to the rugged hills and crags of the Reach, the Forsworn view themselves as the true heirs of the land, pushed aside by Nords and betrayed by empires. They dress in armor made from animal hides and bones, wielding crude weapons enchanted with primal magics. Their rebellion is as much spiritual as it is political, for they see themselves not only as warriors, but as chosen protectors of their ancestors' traditions. Their connection to the Hagravens marks them as distinct among Skyrim's groups. Hagravens, twisted women who sacrifice their humanity for dark magical power, act as leaders and spiritual guides for the Forsworn. They gift briar hearts to the tribe's greatest warriors, replacing their hearts with enchanted briars that grant them immense strength at the cost of humanity. This ritual reveals the lengths to which the Forsworn will go in pursuit of vengeance. To outsiders, it is horrifying, proof of their savagery. To the Forsworn, it is sacred, a transformation that binds them closer to the wild and their ancestral gods. The Forsworn's hatred of Nords is rooted in betrayal. When the Empire granted them a brief moment of autonomy, it was quickly revoked, leading to massacres and imprisonment. The so-called Markarth incident, where Ulfric Stormcloak and his men drove the Forsworn from the city in exchange for the right to worship Talos, solidified their bitterness. From that moment on, the Forsworn saw themselves as oppressed by both Nord and Imperial alike, fueling their endless rebellion. In their eyes, every raid, every ambush, every attack on caravans is not random violence, but resistance against centuries of betrayal. This struggle ties into Skyrim's broader theme of identity and ownership. Who truly owns the Reach? To the Forsworn, the land belongs to the descendants of those who lived there before Nords arrived. To the Nords, it is a hold reclaimed by their ancestors' blood and sweat. This conflict reveals how factions often embody deeper questions about history, justice, and perspective. For players, siding with or against the Forsworn is not simply about fighting enemies, but about deciding whose version of history deserves recognition. Another fascinating group is the Blades, once proud defenders of emperors across Tamriel, now reduced to a scattered few hunted nearly to extinction. Their origins trace back to Akaviri dragon hunters, sworn to protect rulers and wield ancient knowledge of dragon slaying. In Skyrim, only remnants remain, hiding in ruins and caves, struggling to redefine themselves in a world where their emperors are gone and dragons once again soar across the skies. Their decline is a sobering reminder of how even the greatest institutions can crumble under the weight of history. The Blades' rituals emphasize loyalty and secrecy. Members are bound by oaths that span generations, their identities concealed, their purpose clear. They once commanded armies and influenced empires, but now their survival depends on secrecy and finding new allies. Delphine and Esbern, two of the last known Blades in Skyrim, embody this desperate resilience. They place their hope in the Dragonborn, seeing the prophesied hero as a chance to restore both their order and their ancient mission of slaying dragons. Yet even here, their goals clash with others. Their insistence on killing Paarthurnax, the dragon who seeks redemption, reveals the Blades' struggle to adapt to a world where absolutes are no longer simple. Their conflict with the greybeards highlights the contrast between factions that share a common focus yet diverge in philosophy. The greybeards, dwelling atop High Hrothgar, dedicate themselves to the study of the voice, using the Thu'um not for conquest but for enlightenment. They view power as something to be wielded with restraint, a gift to be mastered through silence and meditation. The Blades, by contrast, see the Thu'um as a weapon, one to be honed for the destruction of dragons and the protection of mankind. This opposition creates a powerful metaphor. Two groups, both venerating the same gift, interpret it in radically different ways. The Dragonborn stands at the center of this divide, embodying the choice between violence and peace, tradition and adaptation. The greybeards themselves are shrouded in reverence. Their lives are spent in seclusion, their words rare and heavy with meaning. Even their silence carries weight, for they speak only when necessary, guarding their voices lest they unleash destruction. Their leader, Paarthurnax, embodies both wisdom and controversy. Once a lieutenant of Alduin, he turned against his master and chose the path of peace, guiding mortals in the use of the voice. His presence raises questions of redemption. Can a being who once enslaved mortals through fear truly become a guide for peace? The greybeards believe so, but the Blades remain unconvinced, The conflict between the Blades and the Greybeards underscores Skyrim's fascination with moral ambiguity. Neither faction is wholly right or wrong. The Blades preserve humanity through decisive action, yet their rigidity blinds them to nuance. The Greybeards preach restraint and reflection, yet their refusal to act leaves mortals vulnerable. This tension ensures that players are never offered easy answers, only choices that reveal their own priorities. Together, these factions, assassins whispering in shadow, rebels fighting in the hills, warriors upholding ancient vows, and monks meditating in silence, show how Skyrim is shaped by more than dragons and heroes. It is shaped by the groups who carry forward traditions, each convinced of their own truth. To walk among them is to experience the layers of history that make Skyrim more than a frozen province. It makes it a world alive with voices, both harmonious and conflicting, echoing across mountains and halls. Among the most intriguing factions in Skyrim are those that straddle the line between cultural tradition and political maneuvering. The Stormcloaks embody this tension more clearly than any other group. Their rise under Ulfric reflects not only a desire for independence, but also a clash of identities, as Nords struggle to reconcile their devotion to tradition with the realities of empire and war. Ulfric himself is both a symbol and a controversy. Born in Windhelm and raised in the harsh Nord traditions, he was captured in his youth and held by the Thalmor, where he learned to use the Thuum as a weapon. His duel with High King Torrig, fought with the Voice, remains one of the most divisive events in Skyrim's history. To his followers, it was a rightful challenge, rooted in ancient Nord traditions of trial by combat. To his enemies, it was murder, a betrayal of honor cloaked in archaic justifications. This divide illustrates how the Stormcloak Rebellion is not only a political war, but also a cultural struggle over what defines legitimacy and freedom. The Stormcloak's identity is rooted in their faith in Talos. When the Empire signed the White Gold Concordat with the Aldmeri Dominion, outlawing the worship of Talos, Nords across Skyrim felt a deep wound. Talos, once known as Tiber Septim, was both a man and a god, a symbol of Nord power and the empire they had built. To forbid his worship was to erase their heritage. The Stormcloaks positioned themselves as defenders of faith and tradition, guardians of Skyrim's independence against both the Empire's decrees and elven interference. This religious foundation gave their cause a fervor that extended beyond politics. For many Nords, fighting with the Stormcloaks was not only rebellion, but devotion, yet the rebellion revealed fractures within Skyrim itself. Not every Nord supported Ulfric's vision. Some viewed his insistence on independence as reckless, endangering Skyrim by weakening its defenses against the Dominion. Others resented his favoritism toward Nords, noting the harsh treatment of Dunmer in Windhelm and the exclusion of outsiders from positions of influence. These criticisms highlight how the Stormcloaks embody both pride and prejudice, making them as divisive within Skyrim as they are against the Empire. The Imperial Legion, by contrast, represents order and stability. Their banners fly in solitude, a city that embodies the Empire's authority in Skyrim. For Imperial loyalists, remaining within the Empire ensures protection from the Dominion, access to trade, and the preservation of a fragile peace. Their generals argue that the White Gold Concordat was a necessary compromise, a bitter treaty signed not out of weakness, but out of survival after the Great War. To them, Ulfric's rebellion is short-sighted, threatening to fracture the Empire at a time when unity is most needed. The Legion's presence in Skyrim demonstrates the tension between loyalty to law and recognition of local identity. Their soldiers enforce imperial decrees, including the ban on Talos worship, but many quietly sympathize with Nord traditions. Their forts dot the landscape, serving as reminders of the Empire's reach, yet they are constantly challenged by Stormcloak raids. Every skirmish, every battle for a fort, underscores the precarious balance between empire and rebellion. For players, choosing a side is not only about military strategy, but also about cultural alignment, forcing them to weigh stability against independence. This Civil War storyline underscores Skyrim's broader theme: the struggle between past and future. The Stormcloaks cling to heritage, while the Legion pushes for compromise. Neither side offers a perfect solution, and both carry flaws that make them difficult to embrace fully. In this way, the Civil War mirrors real struggles of identity, showing how factions often become vessels for deeper questions of who a people are and what they are willing to sacrifice. Beyond these great political powers, Skyrim is filled with smaller but equally compelling factions. The Bards College in Solitude, for instance, represents an entirely different kind of influence. While not warriors or assassins, the bards shape culture and memory through song and story. Their halls ring with tales of heroes, tragedies, and legends, keeping history alive in ways that swords cannot. In a land so defined by battle, the Bards College reminds us that stories are just as important in shaping identity as victories on the field. The rituals of the Bards College are gentler than those of the Companions or the Dark Brotherhood, but no less meaningful. Students study music, poetry, and lore, learning to weave words that inspire courage or sorrow. They perform at feasts, funerals, and festivals, binding communities together with shared songs. Their influence is subtle but profound, for in Skyrim, where dragons roar and kingdoms clash, the voice of a bard ensures that deeds are remembered and meaning is drawn from chaos. Without them, the stories of warriors and kings would fade into silence. Another group tied to Skyrim's cultural fabric is the Vigilants of Stendarr. These holy warriors dedicate their lives to hunting Daedra and those who consort with them. They roam the land, offering aid to the faithful and condemning cultists who turn to forbidden worship. To the Vigilants, Daedra are not simply dangerous beings, but existential threats to humanity. Their armor and amulets bear the symbols of Stendarr, the god of mercy and justice, yet their mercy rarely extends to those they consider corrupted. Their zeal places them in constant conflict with Skyrim's darker cults, especially those devoted to Molag Bal or Boethia. The Vigilants' presence is both reassuring and unsettling. For villagers beset by vampires or Daedric worshippers, they are protectors. For mages experimenting with conjuration or scholars studying forbidden texts, they are persecutors. This duality makes them controversial, admired by some and feared by others. Their headquarters at the Hall of the Vigilant represents their unity, though their downfall at the hands of vampires during Skyrim's events illustrates the peril of zealotry without adaptability. Even holy warriors, it seems, can fall to the darkness they seek to eradicate. The Dawn Guard represents another faction forged in response to vampires, though their methods differ from the Vigilants. Founded by Isrin, a former Vigilant disillusioned with their rigid dogma, the Dawn Guard arose as a pragmatic order dedicated to vampire hunting. Their stronghold, Fort Dawnguard, sits in the Rift, a fortress bristling with crossbows, bolts, and sunlight-infused weapons. Unlike the Vigilants, the Dawnguard are less concerned with ideology and more focused on effectiveness. They recruit mercenaries, adventurers, and even outcasts, uniting them under the banner of protecting Skyrim from the growing vampire menace. Their struggle against Lord Harkon and his Volkihar clan is one of Skyrim's most dramatic conflicts. The Dawnguard's crossbows and armored warhounds clash against the vampires' ancient magic and blood-fueled power. Their leader, Isran, embodies their uncompromising stance, refusing to bend even when faced with overwhelming odds. Yet their inclusivity sets them apart. While the Vigilants reject those tainted by darkness, the Dawnguard accept even the Dragonborn as a potential vampire ally, trusting that choice and conviction can matter more than bloodlines. This flexibility demonstrates a form of pragmatism rare in Skyrim's often rigid factions. The Volkihar clan itself adds further depth to Skyrim's tapestry of factions. Dwelling in Castle Volkihar on the frozen northern coast, they represent vampirism at its most aristocratic. Lord Harkon seeks to blot out the sun itself, reshaping the world into one ruled by his kind. His clan views themselves as superior beings, lords of night destined to rule over mortals. Their rituals, from blood feasts to dark bargains, are steeped in decadence and cruelty. Yet their tragic dimension lies in their humanity, for every vampire was once a mortal who chose or was forced to embrace eternity at a terrible price. The Dawnguard and Volkihar conflict embodies Skyrim's fascination with light and shadow. It is not simply a war of hunters and monsters, but a clash of ideologies about what it means to be human. The Dawnguard cling to the fragile light of mortality, while the Volkihar embrace the eternal night of vampirism. This contrast offers a reflection of Skyrim itself, a land forever caught between survival and transformation. Through these factions, from rebels to bards, from zealots to hunters, Skyrim reveals its complexity. No single group defines the land. Instead, it is the interplay of these organizations, their ideals, and their rivalries that make Skyrim feel alive. Each faction tells a story not only about itself, but about the people it represents. Together, they weave a portrait of a province that is never static, always torn between tradition and change, faith and doubt, light and shadow. The land of Skyrim is vast, but its heart beats through the many groups that shape its destiny, each one representing a philosophy, a culture, or a hidden ambition. Some factions operate in plain sight, recruiting openly, while others linger in shadows, their influence felt more than seen. Among these, the Bards College, the Forsworn, and the more obscure Daedric cults contribute layers of richness that often go overlooked by those who only see Skyrim as a land of dragons and civil war. The Bards College in Solitude may appear light-hearted compared to warriors or assassins, yet it holds a crucial role in maintaining the soul of Skyrim's culture. Stories and songs are how the Nords preserve history, turning victories into legends and tragedies into lessons. Bards wander from taverns to keeps, their voices binding together communities that might otherwise be divided by war. The college ensures that this oral tradition endures, training new generations to carry the past into the future. Their influence is subtle, yet the power of a song to inspire or heal can shape the province as much as steel or spell. The Bards College represents continuity, reminding us that history survives not only in ruins and relics, but in the words sung around a fire. The rituals of the Bards College reflect the belief that art is sacred. Students are expected to perform ballads that honor the 9 divines, celebrate heroic deeds, or mourn the fallen. To master a song is to master the power to stir hearts, and in a land fractured by civil war, that influence is invaluable. While their halls may not echo with the clash of weapons, their contribution lies in ensuring that no hero's sacrifice is forgotten. In this way, they act as historians, teachers, and preservers of identity, offering a softer but no less enduring legacy. The forsworn, by contrast, are defined by blood and rebellion. Their story is one of dispossession and revenge. To the Nords, they are savage rebels driven by cruelty to themselves. They are the true rulers of the Reach, betrayed by empires and forced into exile. Their culture blends ancient Reachman traditions with grim magic granted by the Hagravens. Warriors undergo the terrifying ritual of becoming Briarhearts, their chests cut open and hearts replaced with briars infused with dark enchantments. This grotesque act symbolizes their devotion, marking them as champions willing to sacrifice their humanity for vengeance. The Forsworn strongholds, hidden in the mountains and forests of the Reach, are reminders of their resilience. They carve out lives in caves and ruins, relying on guerrilla tactics to harry Nord and Imperial alike. Their banners are painted with crude symbols of defiance. Their camps echo with chants to old gods long forgotten by the rest of Tamriel. For them, every raid against a caravan or ambush of a patrol is not crime, but justice. They see themselves as liberators, reclaiming land stolen by invaders, no matter how violent the path. This perspective reveals the complexity of Skyrim's conflicts, reminding us that even those branded as villains believe in the righteousness of their cause. Daedric cults add another dimension to Skyrim's factional landscape. Each cult serves a Daedric prince, ranging from the seductive to the horrifying. Some, like the worshippers of Azura, are seen as benign, offering guidance and visions of fate. Others, like the cult of Molag Bal, embody cruelty and domination. Skyrim is dotted with shrines to these otherworldly beings, hidden in caves or standing proudly on mountainsides, each one a focal point for devotion. To join a cult is to surrender autonomy, accepting the prince's gifts in exchange for servitude. These groups often clash with the vigilance of Stendarr, whose holy mission is to stamp out Daedric influence wherever it is found. One of the most infamous cults in Skyrim serves Namira, the Lady of Decay. Her followers embrace cannibalism, gathering in secret to feast on the flesh of mortals in her honor. To outsiders, their practices are abhorrent, but to cultists, consuming the dead is sacred, a way of partaking in the eternal cycle of rot and renewal. Similarly, the devotees of Boethia revel in treachery and bloodshed, staging gladiatorial contests where followers must slay their companions to prove devotion. These groups remind us that Skyrim is not only a land of noble warriors, but also one where darker impulses take root, offering mortals paths to power at great personal cost. The vigilance of Stendarr view these cults as abominations, dedicating themselves to rooting out their influence. Armed with silver weapons and burning zeal, they wander the roads of Skyrim, preaching Stendarr's mercy and justice while striking down vampires, werewolves, and cultists. Their Hall of the Vigilant once stood as a bastion of faith in the Pale, but it fell to a vampire assault, leaving the order fractured. This destruction revealed the danger of rigid zeal. While the Vigilants were uncompromising in their beliefs, they were unprepared for the scale of the threats they faced. Their fall opened the way for the Dawnguard to rise, showing how even righteous causes falter without adaptability. The Dawnguard, founded by Isran, took up the mantle of vampire hunting with a more pragmatic approach. Their fortress in the Rift bristles with defenses, warhounds, and weapons crafted specifically to counter the undead. Unlike the Vigilants, they welcome outsiders, valuing skill and resolve over purity of faith. Their struggle against the Volkihar vampires demonstrates their effectiveness, with battles fought in castles, caves, and frozen coasts. The Dawnguard's adaptability reflects the strength of diversity, showing that survival in Skyrim depends as much on flexibility as on conviction. The Volkihar clan, led by Lord Harkon, represents vampirism elevated to tyranny. Dwelling in Castle Volkihar, they view themselves as lords destined to rule over mortals, their decadence matched only by their cruelty. Harkon's plan to blot out the sun itself reveals his ambition, seeking to transform Skyrim into a realm of eternal night. His clan's rituals are steeped in blood magic, and their elegance hides monstrous appetites. They embody both allure and horror, offering immortality at the cost of humanity. Their presence ensures that the struggle against darkness in Skyrim is never abstract but embodied in figures who wield both charm and terror. The balance between these groups, the Vigilants, the Dawnguard, and the Volkihar, reflects Skyrim's fascination with cycles of light and dark. Each faction believes it holds the truth, whether it be holy zeal, pragmatic protection, or vampiric supremacy, yet none escape the consequences of their choices. The Vigilants fall to arrogance, the Dawnguard endure through adaptability, and the Volkihar succumb to decadence. These outcomes remind us that factions are not only defined by what they fight for, but also by how they face change. Smaller factions, too, add richness to Skyrim's world. The Blackbriar family in Riftton acts almost as a faction of its own, their wealth and influence allowing them to manipulate guilds, guards, and even jarls. Maven Blackbriar's control demonstrates how power in Skyrim does not always come from armies or divine patrons, but from coin and corruption. Similarly, the Silverblood family in Markarth wields its influence through mines and mercenaries, turning economic power into political dominance. These families may not have banners or rituals, but they shape Skyrim as much as the Companions or the Thieves Guild, proving that factions come in many forms. Through all of these groups, Skyrim's factions weave a portrait of complexity. Each one carries with it history, ambition, and flaw, ensuring that no decision is simple. To ally with one is to inherit both its strength and its burden. This web of connections transforms Skyrim from a frozen land of ruins into a living world where every hall, cave, and fortress echoes with the voices of those who believe in their cause. Whether through song, rebellion, faith, or shadow, Skyrim's factions remind us that the world is shaped as much by those who gather together as by dragons soaring overhead. The factions of Skyrim are bound not only by tradition, but by the ancient powers that still linger in the land, many of them Daedric in nature. Among the most enigmatic of these are the cults that serve the princes of oblivion, each one offering mortals gifts that twist the very fabric of their lives. These cults often exist in shadows, yet their influence extends into every corner of Skyrim, shaping its people in ways both subtle and terrifying. One of the most striking examples is the cult of Molag Bal, the Daedric prince of domination and enslavement. His worshippers thrive in secrecy, luring innocents into rituals that break both body and spirit. In Skyrim, his presence is most vividly felt through his House of Horrors quest, where a defiled shrine becomes the site of unspeakable cruelty. Followers of Molag Bal embody absolute control, a philosophy that stands in stark opposition to Skyrim's rugged independence. Their existence reminds us that beneath the surface of ordinary villages and towns, darker forces may lurk, waiting for a chance to assert power. Boethia's cult represents another kind of devotion, rooted in treachery and strength. The Daedric prince of deceit and plots demands loyalty, proven through betrayal. Followers are often forced to fight one another in brutal contests, with the victor earning the right to serve. In Skyrim, the Dragonborn witnesses such contests firsthand at the Sacellum of Boethia, where devotees test their devotion through bloodshed. This philosophy appeals to those who see power as the only true measure of worth. To them, betrayal is not sin, but sacrament, proving that ambition outweighs loyalty in the pursuit of greatness. Mehrunes Dagon, remembered for his invasion of Tamriel during the events of Oblivion, maintains a presence in Skyrim through his scattered cultists and the reforging of his razor. His followers embody destruction, reveling in chaos and bloodshed. The shrine of Mehrunes Dagon in Skyrim becomes a focal point for this devotion, as cultists guard it with fanatical zeal. To them, every sacrifice is a spark of chaos that fuels their master's domain. The razor itself, a dagger said to have the power to slay any being with a single cut, symbolizes their obsession with decisive destruction. Even when scattered and hunted, they cling to the belief that Tamriel will one day burn again under their master's will. Azura's followers represent a gentler side of Daedric worship, though still steeped in mystery. The goddess of twilight and dawn inspires devotion among mortals who see her as a guiding star. Her shrine, a towering statue overlooking the frozen lands, is a place of pilgrimage for those who seek visions and prophecy. Unlike the darker princes, Azura's cultists often act as seers and guides, offering mortals glimpses of fate. Yet even her gifts come with weighty consequences, as seen in the creation of Azura's star, a soul gem of immense power. The devotion of her followers reminds us that not all Daedric cults revel in blood and betrayal. Some inspire hope, even if their motives remain beyond mortal understanding. Clavicus Vile's cult appeals to those who covet power, wealth, or even immortality, for he is the Daedric prince of bargains. His followers often strike pacts that bring short-term gain at great cost. The presence of Barbas, his hound, in Skyrim underscores the whimsical yet dangerous nature of his bargains. To mortals, the promise of a wish fulfilled is irresistible, but Vile's gifts twist with irony, leaving devotees bound to his will. His cultists remind us that temptation often masquerades as opportunity, and Skyrim's desperate survivors are as vulnerable to such bargains as any in Tamriel. Hermaeus Mora, the keeper of forbidden knowledge, commands worshippers who hunger for secrets. His black books, scattered through the land, transport mortals to Apocrypha, a realm of ink and endless tomes guarded by writhing tentacles. His followers often descend into madness, consumed by the pursuit of knowledge beyond mortal limits. In Skyrim, Hermaeus Mora's presence is strongest in the Dragonborn expansion, where he offers power in exchange for servitude. His cultists illustrate the dangers of curiosity without restraint, showing how the desire to know can erode both sanity and humanity. Sanguine, the prince of revelry, inspires cults far different from those of destruction or knowledge. His followers indulge in feasts, intoxication, and hedonism, treating life as an endless celebration. Yet beneath their laughter lies chaos, for Sanguine's revels often end in ruin. In Skyrim, His presence is felt most vividly through the strange tale of a drunken adventure with the Dragonborn, leading to temples desecrated and vows broken. His cultists remind us that even joy can become destructive when unrestrained, and that excess carries dangers as profound as cruelty or domination. Sheogorath, the Prince of Madness, is perhaps the most unpredictable figure among the Daedra. His cultists embody chaos itself, their actions ranging from nonsensical pranks to violent outbursts. In Skyrim, his influence is seen in the quest known as the Mind of Madness, where mortals become trapped in a realm of shifting logic and lunacy. His devotees embrace unpredictability as truth, living lives that blur the line between comedy and tragedy. To outsiders, they are insane. To themselves, they are liberated from the constraints of reason. Their existence highlights how madness itself can become a creed, shaping factions as much as discipline or tradition. The influence of these Daedric cults extends beyond their shrines. They shape politics and power, often pulling mortals into their service, whether by choice or coercion. A Nord farmer who strikes a bargain with Clavicus Vile, a scholar who loses themselves in a black book, or a soldier who calls on Boethia for strength, each becomes part of a web that spans Tamriel. Their stories remind us that factions are not always built in halls or armies, but can form in whispers, rituals, and pacts sealed under moonlight. Skyrim's richness lies in how these hidden groups add depth to a land already torn by war and dragons. But the Daedric cults are not the only secretive groups that shape Skyrim. Hidden within the landscape are factions like the Blackbriars of Riftton, whose influence rivals any Jarl. Maven Blackbriar's reach extends into the Thieves Guild, the Guards, and even the Imperials themselves. Her control over Riftton demonstrates how a single family, armed with wealth and ruthlessness, can dominate a hold without armies or shrines. The Blackbriars embody the reality that power does not always wear armor or wield spells. Sometimes it walks softly, hidden behind gold and whispered threats. Likewise, the Silverblood family in Markarth represents another kind of influence. With their control of the Sidna mine, they shape the economy of the Reach, ensuring that their will is carried out through coin as much as through mercenaries. Their manipulation of politics and justice highlights how corruption can function as a faction in itself, blurring the line between government and organized crime. These families remind us that not all power in Skyrim flows from Daedra or dragons. Sometimes it rests in the hands of mortals who understand how to twist systems to their advantage. Through the stories of cults, clans, and families, Skyrim demonstrates the variety of factions that shape its world. From the decadent halls of vampires to the echoing songs of bards, from rebels wielding crude weapons to cultists whispering to unseen gods, each group adds texture and complexity to the province. Together, they form a portrait of a land where identity is contested, where faith and ambition collide, and where every cave, castle, and cavern might conceal a new story. When exploring Skyrim, it becomes clear that not all factions are grand in scale or directly tied to ancient gods. Some are born of necessity, forged by mortals who carve out their place in a harsh and unforgiving land. These smaller factions might lack the sweeping legacies of the Companions or the College of Winterhold, yet they reveal much about the daily struggles and ambitions of the people who call Skyrim home. One such group is the Blackbriar family of Riftton, whose name is whispered with equal parts fear and respect. Maven Blackbriar, the matriarch, has transformed her kin into something greater than a household. They are a force that rivals Jarls, manipulating politics, crime, and trade alike. Through connections with the Thieves Guild and her influence over both guards and nobles, Maven ensures that little happens in Riftton without her approval. Even the Imperials and Stormcloaks treat her with caution, acknowledging her reach while begrudging her methods. In Maven, we see how an individual's cunning can elevate a family into a faction all its own, wielding influence equal to armies. The Blackbriar's rise is a testament to the power of wealth and corruption. While the Thieves Guild fell into decline, Maven propped it up, bending it to her will. Her control extended beyond the Ratway into every corner of Riftton, from the docks to the marketplace. To locals, resisting her often means ruin, for her network can ensure that rivals are stripped of trade or accused of crimes. In this way, the Blackbriars embody Skyrim's darker truth. Sometimes power comes not from Daedric pacts or dragon shouts, but from the simple combination of gold, fear, and ambition. In contrast to Riftton's shadows, the Silverblood family dominates Markarth with a different sort of authority. Their wealth flows from the Sidna mine, the source of precious silver that fuels the city's economy. Thonar and Thongvor Silverblood manipulate the Hold's politics, ensuring that Jarls and guards alike dance to their tune. Their reach extends into justice itself, with innocent citizens thrown into the prison mine to serve sentences that benefit the family's profits. For the Silverbloods, the line between governance and exploitation has long since blurred. They represent how wealth, when unchecked, can become indistinguishable from tyranny. Markarth's troubled history with the Forsworn only deepens the Silverbloods' grip. Their willingness to strike deals, bribe officials, or frame enemies ensures that no challenge to their dominance lasts long. To outsiders, they may appear as nobles of means. To the people of the Reach, they are overlords, cloaked in respectability. Their influence demonstrates that factions are not always armies or cults. Sometimes they are families whose power extends like roots into every institution, twisting them to serve private ambition. Another faction often overlooked is the East Empire Company, a vast trading organization with a presence across Tamriel. In Skyrim, their offices in Windhelm and Solitude serve as hubs for goods flowing across the Sea of Ghosts. They represent the interests of merchants and nobles alike, their contracts binding entire towns to the rhythms of trade. Their power lies not in armies but in economics, for without their ships and coin, Skyrim's already fragile stability would fracture further. The East Empire Company exemplifies how mercantile factions shape the world quietly, yet profoundly, for trade is as vital to survival as swords and spells. The East Empire Company's dealings, however, are not without shadows. Smuggling and corruption often trail behind their contracts, with local officials bribed to turn blind eyes. Their rivalry with pirates and independent traders fuels skirmishes along the coast, while their willingness to exploit Skyrim's resources creates resentment among locals. Yet their presence is tolerated, even welcomed, because their wealth sustains the cities that house them. In this way, the East Empire Company embodies the paradox of commerce, necessary for prosperity, yet always vulnerable to corruption. Alongside these economic powers are groups tied to religion, whose influence runs as deeply as steel or coin. The cult of Talos, though outlawed by the Empire, persists in Skyrim with fervent devotion. Shrines to the god dot the landscape, hidden in caves or standing defiantly along roads. For Nords, Talos embodies not only divinity, but identity. His worship is an act of resistance, a statement that their heritage cannot be erased by foreign decrees. Those who gather at his shrines form communities of faith that function as factions in their own right, united not by banners or leaders, but by devotion. The Empire's suppression of Talos worship deepens the divide between factions. For Imperial loyalists, obeying the White Gold Concordat is a grim necessity, a compromise that prevents war with the Aldmeri Dominion. For the faithful of Talos, it is betrayal, proof that the Empire has forsaken its own foundation. This tension turns even small gatherings of worshippers into acts of rebellion. In Skyrim, where belief is intertwined with survival, such cults prove that faith can be as potent a weapon as steel. The greybeards, though few in number, also represent a spiritual faction of immense significance. High atop the throat of the world, they live in seclusion, devoted to mastery of the voice. Their silence is as telling as their words, for they speak rarely, knowing that every utterance carries power. To the greybeards, the Thu'um is not a weapon to be wielded recklessly, but a gift meant for meditation and enlightenment. Their leader, Parthurnax, embodies this philosophy, guiding mortals toward restraint despite his own past as Alduin's lieutenant. This paradox makes the greybeards both revered and controversial, for while many respect their wisdom, others question their refusal to intervene directly in Skyrim's struggles. Their contrast with the Blades highlights the complexity of Skyrim's factional landscape. Where the Blades demand action, the greybeards counsel patience. Where the Blades see dragons as threats to be destroyed, the greybeards see them as part of the world's balance. This divide forces the Dragonborn into the center, embodying the conflict between destruction and understanding. The greybeards' teachings remind us that factions are not always defined by conquest. Sometimes they are defined by the choice to abstain, to remain watchers rather than warriors. Smaller guilds and societies add further depth to Skyrim's world. The Hunters, though not a formal guild, function as a loose faction of woodsmen and trappers who sustain themselves and their villages through knowledge of the wilds. Their skills in tracking, archery, and survival make them indispensable to communities scattered across the forests and tundras. Their presence shows how factions can form not from hierarchy, but from shared craft, uniting individuals in pursuit of common livelihood. Similarly, the Alik'r warriors, though outsiders, act as a faction within Skyrim. Hailing from Hammerfell, they scour the province in search of fugitives and debts, their loyalty to their homeland making them both respected and distrusted. Their distinctive curved swords and desert garb set them apart, marking them as strangers in a land of snow. Yet their presence demonstrates how Skyrim, though remote, is still tied to the broader currents of Tamriel. The Alik'r remind us that factions are not limited by borders. They are threads woven into a tapestry that spans continents. These varied groups, from corrupt families to wandering warriors, demonstrate the diversity of Skyrim's factional life. They show that power is not always tied to dragons or Daedra, but often to the choices of mortals shaping their own paths. Each faction, no matter how small, adds texture to the province, ensuring that every tavern, hall, and mountain path carries the weight of hidden alliances and rivalries. When one considers the factions of Skyrim, it is easy to focus only on the well-known groups that dominate quests and shape the civil war. Yet scattered across the land are countless smaller societies, religious orders, and even forgotten remnants of ancient powers that all leave subtle marks upon the province. These groups may not wield armies or command cities. but they weave into Skyrim's atmosphere, filling it with layers of history, mystery, and meaning. Among the most enduring of these subtle influences is the Nine Divines, though not always presented as a faction in the same way as the Companions or the Thieves Guild. The worship of the Divines binds together temples, priests, and pilgrims who travel across the land to honor the gods of the Empire. Temples in Solitude, Markarth, and other cities serve as centers of faith where the faithful can find blessings and healing. The role of the Divines demonstrates that even as the land is torn by war and plagued by dragons, many still cling to a sense of higher order. To the priesthood, their work is not only religious but also political, for the suppression of Talos worship has divided believers and driven wedges between Skyrim and Cyrodiil. This conflict over Talos worship essentially creates factions within the larger body of faith itself. Priests in Solitude carefully follow imperial decrees, ensuring no open veneration of Talos occurs within their walls. In Windhelm and Whiterun, however, shrines to Talos stand boldly, visited daily by Nords who refuse to abandon their god. This division illustrates how a single religious order can fracture into competing factions based on loyalty, politics, and conviction. The faithful themselves become participants in the ongoing civil struggle, their prayers serving as silent rebellion or reluctant obedience. In Whiterun, the Gildergreen tree in the heart of the city symbolizes another form of factional devotion. The tree, sacred to Kinnereth, is tended by priestess Danica Purespring, whose followers view its withered state as a tragedy to be corrected. While not a faction in the traditional sense, the worshippers of Kinnereth and their mission to restore the tree reveal how faith can gather people into shared causes. When the tree is rejuvenated through the sapling of Eldergleam, the community around Whiterun sees it not only as a miracle, but as proof of divine presence. In such moments, religion becomes more than worship. It becomes a movement with its own subtle power. Smaller societies often emerge around specific crafts, such as the Bards College in Solitude. Though their work centers on art rather than war, the Bards form a network of musicians and historians who preserve stories of Skyrim's past. They represent the softer side of factional life, one rooted not in dominance but in memory. By spreading songs and tales, they ensure that the legends of Skyrim live on, giving mortals strength through culture rather than combat. The college may be small, but its influence resonates across taverns and halls, as every bard who travels carries their traditions outward like seeds in the wind. The presence of necromantic cults shows a darker form of devotion. Scattered groups of necromancers seek to push the boundaries of life and death, often hiding in ruins or caves where they perform their grim rituals. While many see them as little more than criminals, they function as organized cells with their own hierarchies and goals. Some serve Mannimarco, the king of worms, or cling to fragments of his teachings. Others pursue their own experiments, seeking to raise armies of the dead or achieve immortality. These necromantic circles act as factions defined by secrecy and taboo, reminding players that not all allegiances are noble or visible. Another group of importance, though often hidden from view, is the Vigilance of Stendarr. They dedicate themselves to rooting out Daedra worship, vampires, and other abominations. In Skyrim, their headquarters at the Hall of the Vigilant once served as a bastion of faith and discipline, with members roaming the land to destroy dark forces. Their strict adherence to their mission set them apart from other factions, for their loyalty was not to politics, but to purity. The Dawnguard expansion reveals their vulnerability, however, as the vampires of Volkihar destroy their hull, leaving the vigilance fractured and desperate. This moment captures how fragile some factions can be, undone not by ideology, but by overwhelming force. The Dawnguard themselves, rising from the ashes of Skyrim's vampiric crisis, represent a different kind of faith-driven faction. While their purpose is practical to hunt and eradicate vampires, their zeal turns them into something more than hunters. Led by Isran, the Dawnguard embrace a philosophy of vigilance and distrust, believing that only constant watchfulness can preserve mortals from the shadows of the undead. Their fortress, rebuilt and armed with advanced crossbows and warhounds, reflects their transformation from scattered defenders into a true military order. In their rise, one sees how crisis can forge unity, turning scattered individuals into a faction with focus and might. In opposition to the Dawnguard are the Volkihar vampires, whose ancient lord Harkon seeks to blot out the sun itself. His court within Castle Volkihar embodies decadence and horror, with nobles who have long abandoned humanity for eternal night. This court operates as a faction in every sense, with its own hierarchy, rituals, and ambitions. Members of the Volkihar see themselves as inheritors of a new world, one where mortals are cattle and vampires reign supreme. Their existence emphasizes how Skyrim's factional struggles often reflect larger themes of choice. Will mortals embrace light and vigilance, or succumb to eternal shadow? Beyond vampires and hunters, one encounters countless smaller cults tied to the Daedric princes. The worshippers of Boethia, for instance, test their devotion through rituals of combat and betrayal. Those who survive become her champions, bound to a faction defined by treachery and strength. The cult of Mehrunes Dagon, hidden within his shrine, likewise draws mortals into schemes of destruction, dreaming of fire and conquest. Each Daedric cult is small in scale, yet together they reveal how Skyrim's people seek power beyond mortality, forming factions devoted not to survival, but to gods of chaos and ambition. Bandit clans also deserve mention as factions in their own right. While often dismissed as rabble, these groups organize themselves around leaders, territories, and shared plunder. A bandit chief commands loyalty through fear or charisma, dividing spoils among lieutenants and thugs. Though less formal than the Companions or the Thieves Guild, their structures mirror those of more established groups. They control forts, caves, and roads, exerting influence over trade and travel. In their own way, they demonstrate how even lawlessness produces factions, built from the simple need for strength in numbers. Within the Reach, the forsworn epitomize how banditry can transform into ideology. These rebels see themselves as the true heirs of the land, driven from their homes by Nords and betrayed by the Empire. Their use of wild magic and alliances with Hagravens sets them apart, giving their faction a flavor of both rebellion and witchcraft. While many dismiss them as savages, their persistence across decades shows that even marginalized groups can endure when bound by shared grievance and identity. To the forsworn, every raid, every captured fort, is part of a larger struggle to reclaim what was stolen. Even groups of mercenaries form factions of note. In Whiterun, the mercenary company known as the Companions may dominate the spotlight, but others, like the Bloodhorkers, operate in shadows. This pirate band in the North Seas blends seafaring with raiding, blurring the line between mercenary and outlaw. The Blackbriar family often employs such groups for their own ends, showing how overlapping alliances can transform a simple gang into a faction tied to greater powers. These mercenary circles remind us that loyalty in Skyrim is often purchased, and factions can be as fleeting as a contract. The politics of Skyrim also produce informal factions within holds. In Solitude, the loyalists to the Imperial crown clash quietly with Nord traditionalists. In Windhelm, the Stormcloak capital, suspicion of outsiders creates a factional divide within the very walls of the city, where Dunmer and Argonians are treated as second class. These divisions may not have names or banners, but they function as factions nonetheless, shaping daily life through prejudice, loyalty, and silent defiance. In this way, even the ordinary citizens of Skyrim become participants in the province's endless web of allegiances. Taken together, these lesser-known factions enrich Skyrim's world by layering it with complexity. They remind us that power is not solely wielded by jarls or guildmasters. It is also found in hidden shrines, family feuds, and even the songs of traveling bards. Skyrim's landscape is not merely one of mountains and dragons. It is a living stage where countless groups, large and small, vie for survival, dominance, or meaning. Each faction, whether mighty or obscure, adds another voice to the chorus that defines the province. One of the most fascinating aspects of Skyrim's factional landscape lies in how even the smallest groups connect to the larger tapestry of Tamriel's history. While the Companions and the College of Winterhold trace their roots back centuries, many other groups exist only within the time of the Dragonborn, springing up to serve purposes both practical and mystical. These factions may not control armies or influence politics on a grand scale, but they shape stories in ways that resonate deeply with those who encounter them. Take, for example, the Alik-Ar Warriors, a band of Redguard mercenaries who roam Skyrim in pursuit of a fugitive named Sadia. Though they claim to be agents of Hammerfell seeking justice, their true motives remain ambiguous, leaving the player to decide whom to trust. The Alik-Ar illustrate how even a wandering band of soldiers can function as a faction, bound by shared origin, skill, and purpose. They are not guilds with banners or temples with shrines, but their presence introduces themes of exile, loyalty, and betrayal into Skyrim's narrative. Another unusual group is the Remnants, an undercover faction of Redguards who fled Hammerfell after refusing to sign the White Gold Concordat. Unlike the Alik-Ar, who operate openly, the Remnants function as a hidden resistance, seeking to undermine Thalmor influence and preserve the independence of Hammerfell. Their existence highlights the way Skyrim's borders are porous, with conflicts from distant provinces spilling into its politics. In this sense, factions are not limited by geography, but instead reflect the wider struggles of Tamriel. The Thalmor themselves cast one of the longest shadows across Skyrim. While not headquartered in the province, their embassy and agents ensure their influence is always felt. As enforcers of the White Gold Concordat, they monitor Talos worship, eliminate dissidents, and manipulate politics behind the scenes. The Thalmor represent a faction whose power lies not in armies visible upon the land, but in whispers, spies, and the fear they inspire. Many of Skyrim's smaller groups define themselves in opposition to the Thalmor, making them a fulcrum around which other allegiances pivot. The Skal of Solstheim also deserve mention as a distinctive faction. Though isolated from the mainland, they embody a unique culture rooted in reverence for the Allmaker. Unlike most other factions, their faith does not align with the divines or Daedric princes, but with a pantheon all their own, one tied to the natural world and balance. The Skal live communally, guided by their shaman and dedicated to maintaining harmony with the land. Their customs, rituals, and resistance to outside influence highlight how factions need not be political or martial to define identity. They remind us that culture itself can be factional, binding people together through shared worldview. Not far from the Skal stands the Temple of Mirach, a faction of enthralled worshippers under the sway of the first Dragonborn. These devotees, bound by the power of black books and Daedric influence, tirelessly labor to raise shrines and monuments. Unlike voluntary guilds, this faction is built upon domination, its members stripped of free will and compelled to serve. Their existence contrasts sharply with the Skal, revealing how factions can embody both freedom and slavery, devotion and coercion. Together, the Skal and Mirach's cult create a stark duality on Solstheim, each representing a vision of how mortals might relate to higher powers. The East Empire Company provides another fascinating study. Though officially a mercantile organization, its influence in Skyrim is vast, with warehouses, docks, and agents scattered across Windhelm and Solitude. The company acts as a faction driven not by ideology, but by profit, seeking to expand trade networks and secure monopolies. Conflicts involving smugglers, pirates, and political alliances show how commerce itself can create factional struggles. For the East Empire Company, loyalty is measured in coin, and power flows not through soldiers or spells, but through control of goods and routes. Pirates who oppose the East Empire Company form their own loose factions. Crews such as the Bloodhawkers represent the chaos that arises whenever wealth concentrates in one place. Their raids are not merely acts of desperation, but expressions of a competing philosophy, one that rejects order and embraces plunder. In this way, the Bloodhawkers function as the shadow of the East Empire Company, a mirror faction embodying the dangers of unrestrained greed. By opposing each other, both groups highlight how factions need not be rooted in nobility or justice to wield influence. Even within families, factional identities emerge. The Blackbriars of Riftton hold sway through intimidation, bribery, and underworld connections. Maven Blackbriar's dominance ensures that her family is not merely a household, but a faction in its own right, with influence that rivals the official Jarl of the Rift. Guards, thieves, and merchants alike answer to her commands, blurring the line between government and crime. Her family exemplifies how factionalism often arises not from formal organization, but from the accumulation of power within a single bloodline. Another family-driven faction exists in Markarth with the Silver Bloods. Owning mines, inns, and guards, they dominate the city's economy, and like the Blackbriars, their power extends into politics. Their rivalry with other local interests turns everyday governance into factional conflict, proving that Skyrim's politics is not solely defined by Imperials and Stormcloaks, but also by ambitious families carving out kingdoms within their walls. These families remind us that factions are not always formed from ideals, but from ambition, inheritance, and greed. On the opposite end of the spectrum lies the circle within the Companions. Though the Companions are a public and respected guild, the circle represents a secret inner faction that holds the true power of the Order. Bound together by the curse of lycanthropy, they guard their secret carefully, guiding the guild's direction from within. The circle illustrates how factions often contain layers within themselves, with public faces concealing hidden truths. Members of the circle may be revered as heroes, but behind the glory lies a brotherhood bound by blood and secrecy. Religious sects beyond the divines also create factional identities. The worshippers of Molag Bal, scattered throughout Skyrim, function as secret societies devoted to domination and cruelty. The House of Horror's quest reveals how mortals can be drawn into such cults, willingly offering service to a Daedric prince who delights in suffering. These cults may lack the scale of larger guilds, but their intensity gives them weight, for every member is fanatically devoted. Such factions remind us that devotion, whether to light or to shadow, is one of the strongest forces binding mortals together. Likewise, the worshippers of Namira form a faction defined by taboo. Dwelling in shadows and caves, they practice cannibalism as sacrament, bound together not by politics, but by hunger and faith. The very act of gathering around shared meals turns them into a faction that stands apart from all others, reviled by the world, yet empowered by their unity. This example demonstrates how even the darkest practices can produce cohesion, transforming individuals into communities. The mythic power of dragons also creates factions by shaping allegiances. The cultists who worship Mirach and Solstheim are one example, but dragon cult ruins scattered across Skyrim reveal that in ancient times, priests served as factions of their own. These dragon priests ruled temples, commanded followers, and maintained power in the name of their draconic masters. Though centuries have passed, their tombs still contain remnants of this factional hierarchy, with Draugr guardians standing as eternal sentinels. Even in undeath, their allegiance endures, proof of how deeply factional devotion can sink into the bones of history. At times, factions form not through religion, politics, or power, but through survival. Refugees band together in cities like Windhelm, where Dunmer communities create their own informal factions. Within the Grey Quarter, solidarity is born from exclusion as Dunmer rely on one another against prejudice and hardship. While not organized in the same way as guilds or cults, these groups embody the essence of factionalism, people united by common need and common cause. These examples show that factions in Skyrim extend far beyond the obvious names of guilds or armies. They exist in mercantile companies, pirate crews, hidden cults, and even families. They arise from faith, ambition, secrecy, and survival, each adding another dimension to the land. To walk through Skyrim is to move through a patchwork of allegiances, visible and hidden, grand and small. Every ruin, every tavern, every hall may conceal the seeds of a faction, waiting to shape the fate of those who encounter it. Skyrim's tapestry of factions also extends into hidden layers of history, where ancient groups once commanded loyalty and shaped events long before the return of dragons. Though many of these organizations no longer exist in their original form, their remnants and legacies echo through ruins, artifacts, and oral tradition. To explore these forgotten groups is to uncover another side of factional life, one where the past continues to shape the present. The Dragon Cult, a faction dating back to the Merethic era, dominated Skyrim when dragons were worshipped as gods. Priests devoted to Alduin and his kin ruled with authority, commanding armies of mortals who served willingly or through fear. Temples like Skuldafn and Forelhost still bear the scars of their reign, guarded by Draugr, who remain bound to their masters in undeath. These priests wielded immense magical power, wearing masks that granted them strength and longevity. Even though the cult fell after the Dragon War, their tombs reveal that devotion outlasted mortality, creating a faction whose members never truly abandoned their cause. The fall of the dragon cult came with the rise of the Dragonborn and the rebellion of mortals against their draconic overlords. Yet even in defeat, the cult's remnants endure as spectral guardians and cursed priests. The existence of dragon priest masks scattered across Skyrim serves as tangible proof of this once mighty faction. Each mask embodies the strength of its bearer, showing how power and identity were bound together in ritual and loyalty. Through these relics, the cult continues to exert influence, inspiring fear and reverence among those who discover them. Another ancient faction, the Snow Elves, played a significant role in Skyrim's earliest history. Once rulers of much of the province, their downfall at the hands of invading Nords forced them into desperate alliances. Betrayed by the Dwemer, they were transformed into the Twisted Falmer, a tragic fate that bound them into a new identity. The Snow Elves themselves no longer exist as a faction, but their legacy lives on in ruins, artifacts, and the haunting presence of the Falmer. Their transformation represents how factions can be broken and reshaped by betrayal, turning once noble peoples into something unrecognizable. The Dwemer, or Deep Elves, also form part of Skyrim's hidden factional history. Known for their unparalleled mastery of engineering and magic, they built vast underground cities filled with automatons and traps. Though their disappearance remains one of Tamriel's greatest mysteries, their presence endures through their machines, which still patrol and defend their ruins as if their masters never left. The Dwemer exemplify how a faction can vanish yet still dominate landscapes and stories. Their influence stretches far beyond their lifetimes, reminding adventurers that power often lingers even after its source is gone. The Forsworn represent a more recent, but equally complex faction rooted in history. Descendants of the Reachmen, they see themselves as rightful rulers of the Reach, displaced by Nords and persecuted by the Empire. Their use of primal magic and their alliances with Hegravens set them apart, creating a distinct culture that blends rebellion with mysticism. Though many dismiss them as savages, their persistence across generations shows that their identity is bound as much by grievance as by culture. To the Forsworn, every act of resistance is both survival and revenge, a continuation of struggles that began long before the Dragonborn's arrival. The College of Winterhold, though still active in Skyrim, is also tied to an ancient legacy. Founded long before the events of the game, the college represents continuity with eras when magic was both feared and revered. Its rivalry with other institutions, its isolation from the rest of Winterhold, and its survival after the Great Collapse highlight how institutions can endure even when their surroundings crumble. The college itself is more than a school. It is a factional survivor, weathering centuries of mistrust and disaster to preserve its role in the province. The Blades, once the Emperor's elite dragon hunters and bodyguards, also bear the marks of decline. In Skyrim, they exist only as shadows of their former selves, reduced to a handful of scattered survivors. Their history as a faction, however, is vast, stretching back to their origins as the Akaviri Dragon Guard. Their loyalty to the Septim line once made them one of the most powerful groups in Tamriel, but the fall of the Empire and the Great War left them fractured. In Skyrim, their conflict with the greybeards reflects not only a philosophical divide, but also the struggle of a faction fighting to preserve its last vestiges of identity. The greybeards themselves are a faction whose roots run deep into the mythic history of Skyrim. Devoted to mastering the Thu'um, they are both spiritual guides and living relics of the Dragon War. Their isolation atop the throat of the world underscores their role as watchers rather than participants, yet their influence is undeniable. The tension between their philosophy of restraint and the Blade's demand for action highlights the complexity of Skyrim's factional landscape. These groups embody opposing visions of how mortals should engage with dragons, offering players a choice between patience and aggression. Factionalism in Skyrim also emerges in less obvious places, such as within guilds that contain hidden layers of authority. The Companions are one such group, with the Circle forming a secretive inner faction bound by lycanthropy. While the public sees them as honorable warriors, those within the Circle share a curse that sets them apart. This duality reveals how factions often contain sub-factions with hidden truths guiding public actions. The existence of the Circle demonstrates how loyalty and secrecy intertwine, creating bonds that are both empowering and isolating. The Thieves Guild also contains such inner layers, particularly when Maven Blackbriar exerts her dominance. Though officially the guild is led by a guildmaster, Maven's control makes her the true power behind the organization. This dynamic shows how factions can be shaped by individuals outside their formal structures, blurring the lines between leadership and manipulation. The guild's resurgence in Skyrim owes as much to Maven's influence as to the actions of the Dragonborn, proving that external forces can redefine a faction's destiny. The Dark Brotherhood, with its tradition of assassination, also reveals the fragility of factions. Once powerful, their numbers in Skyrim have dwindled to a shadow of their former selves. Yet even in decline, their rituals and philosophy continue, ensuring the group survives. Their survival highlights how factions can persist through ideology as much as numbers, for even a handful of devoted assassins can keep the Brotherhood's legacy alive. Their eventual resurgence through the actions of the Dragonborn underscores the theme of renewal, proving that factions may fade but rarely vanish entirely. Factional remnants also persist in ruins and artifacts scattered across the land. The presence of Draugr armies guarding tombs, Dwemer automatons patrolling ancient halls, and Falmer lurking in caverns all represent the survival of factions beyond their mortal lifetimes. These remnants are not merely enemies to be fought. They are echoes of allegiances that once defined entire peoples. By engaging with them, the Dragonborn steps into histories that continue to shape the present. Skyrim's ruins are thus not only dungeons but testimonies to the power of factions that refuse to be forgotten. Even ordinary villages and towns reflect factional divides. In Windhelm, the tension between Nords and Dunmer creates an atmosphere of quiet factionalism, where communities divide along cultural and racial lines. In Solitude, loyalty to the Empire creates its own subtle factional identity, with citizens aligning themselves based on their views of the war. These everyday divisions show that factionalism is not limited to grand guilds or ancient cults, but exists wherever people gather, shaped by belief, loyalty, and circumstance. Taken together, these groups reveal how Skyrim thrives on factional complexity. Every ruin, every hall, every shrine serves as a reminder that Tamriel is not defined by singular powers, but by the interplay of countless allegiances. Some factions endure for centuries, others vanish in an instant, and still others persist only in memory. Yet all contribute to the sense that Skyrim is a living, breathing world, where power and loyalty are always shifting. The factions of Skyrim can be understood not only through their power and influence, but also through their philosophies. Each group, whether large or small, embodies a way of life that guides its members. In this way, Skyrim becomes a stage where competing philosophies play out, offering glimpses into the values and contradictions of its people. To explore these ideas is to see how factions are more than collections of individuals. They are living expressions of belief. The companions, for instance, represent the philosophy of honor through combat. Their devotion to the way of the warrior connects them to ancient Nordic traditions, where strength and courage define worth. The rituals of the companions, such as the trials that induct new members, reflect this philosophy. Every battle becomes a chance to prove one's worth, and every victory a testament to skill. Yet their inner circle, bound by the curse of lycanthropy, complicates this vision of honor. The duality of noble warriors, who also bear the blood of beasts, reflects the tension between appearance and reality. It shows how even the most respected factions contain contradictions. The Thieves Guild embodies another philosophy, one rooted in survival and wealth. In their world, cunning and secrecy outweigh brute strength. Their code is not written in laws but in shadows, with loyalty to gold and guildmates forming the bonds of their order. Their decline in Skyrim illustrates how corruption and greed can weaken even the most resilient organizations, yet their revival under new leadership demonstrates that adaptability is the true strength of thieves. The philosophy of the guild is not permanence but flexibility, an ever-shifting code that thrives in uncertainty. The Dark Brotherhood embodies faith in death as a form of order. Their rituals and devotion to the Night Mother transform murder into sacrament, elevating assassins into priests of silence. Their philosophy teaches that death is not chaos, but destiny, with every contract fulfilling a divine plan. This perspective turns violence into ritual, making the Brotherhood more than killers. They are stewards of fate, believing that every life taken serves a higher order. Even in decline, their philosophy sustains them, for as long as one assassin remains devoted to the Night Mother, the creed endures. The College of Winterhold represents the philosophy of knowledge as power. Though mistrusted by many Nords, the mages of the college see themselves as guardians of wisdom, seeking to uncover truths hidden in the fabric of magic. Their pursuit of knowledge is not without risk, as shown in experiments that sometimes spiral out of control. Yet their philosophy teaches that ignorance is a greater danger than ambition. The collapse of Winterhold, which many blame on the college, highlights the tension between perception and truth. For the college, their survival is proof that knowledge must be pursued despite fear and mistrust. The Stormcloaks represent the philosophy of freedom and identity. Their rebellion is rooted in the belief that Nords must govern themselves and preserve their traditions. Worship of Talos becomes a symbol of this philosophy, a defiance of foreign control and imperial compromise. Yet their vision is not without flaws, for their rhetoric often excludes those who are not Nord, creating division within their own cities. The Stormcloak philosophy thus reveals both the nobility and the limitations of rebellion, showing how the fight for freedom can also foster prejudice. The Imperials embody the philosophy of unity through law. Their presence in Skyrim reflects a belief that order and stability can only be preserved through centralized authority. Their enforcement of the White Gold Concordat, though unpopular, reflects this philosophy of compromise to ensure survival. To them, Skyrim is not just a province, but part of a larger empire that must remain whole in the face of threats like the Aldmeri Dominion. Their philosophy illustrates the cost of empire, survival through sacrifice, unity through restraint. The greybeards embody the philosophy of restraint and balance. By devoting themselves to the voice without wielding it in battle, They teach that true strength lies not in power, but in discipline. Their silence is as meaningful as their words, reflecting a belief that wisdom often comes from withholding action. Their philosophy contrasts sharply with that of the Blades, who see inaction as weakness. This clash reveals how even philosophies rooted in noble intentions can conflict, offering different paths to the same challenges. The Blades embody the philosophy of duty above all else. Their long history of serving emperors and defending Tamriel from dragons has shaped them into an order of loyalty and sacrifice. In Skyrim, their dwindling numbers sharpen this philosophy into desperation. To them, every dragon represents an existential threat, and every choice must serve the greater duty of protection. Their philosophy demonstrates how devotion can become rigidity, leaving little room for compromise. Yet it also shows the strength of loyalty, for even in near extinction, their sense of duty endures. The Dawnguard embody the philosophy of vigilance. Their mission to protect mortals from vampires reflects a belief that evil thrives when not actively opposed. To them, every night poses danger, and every village must be watched over. Their fortifications, weapons, and warhounds are expressions of this philosophy, turning vigilance into tangible strength. Their opposition, the Volkihar vampires, embody an opposing philosophy, one of dominance and eternal night. By feeding upon mortals and seeking to blot out the sun, they transform survival into conquest. Together, the Dawnguard and Volkihar reveal how philosophies can clash in ways that shape the world's balance. The Forsworn embody the philosophy of reclamation. To them, the Reach belongs not to Nords or Imperials, but to their ancestors. Every raid, every act of defiance is an attempt to reclaim what was lost. Their philosophy is rooted in grievance, but sustained by faith in identity. Even their alliances with Hagravans, though dark, reflect a willingness to embrace any path that restores their land. Their philosophy reminds us that history is not only written in books, but carried in blood and memory. The Skal embody the philosophy of harmony with the natural world. Their devotion to the Allmaker teaches them that balance is the key to survival, with every act of reverence sustaining the land. Their philosophy contrasts sharply with Mirok's cult, which embodies domination through power. Where the Skal see the world as a cycle of giving and receiving, Mirok's followers see it as a prize to be controlled. This opposition reflects the eternal struggle between harmony and ambition, a theme that recurs across Skyrim's factions. The necromancers of Skyrim embody the philosophy of mastery over death. Their rituals and experiments reflect a refusal to accept mortality, a desire to bend even the grave to their will. To them, the boundary between life and death is not sacred but malleable, a frontier to be conquered. Their philosophy horrifies others but reveals the extremes of ambition. It demonstrates how philosophy can justify even the most forbidden practices, transforming them into creed and community. In examining these philosophies, one sees that factions in Skyrim are not merely groups of individuals, but embodiments of values. Each represents a way of viewing the world, a belief system that guides choices and actions. These philosophies often conflict, creating the tensions that define the province. Skyrim is thus not only a land of mountains and dragons, but a living stage where beliefs compete for dominance. To walk its roads is to encounter not just factions but ideas, each struggling to shape the future.